Welcome to the Special Policy and Resources Committee, 6th of March. We will start with procedural business. 131A, Declaration of Substitutes.
Councillor Davey for Councillor Littman.
Thank you. And I know Councillor Bowden is on his way for Councillor Shanks, but he's hurt his leg, so he's a bit slow. He's using ski sticks to walk or something. Any other declaration of substitute? No? Declaration of interests. Do any members wish to declare a disclosable pecuniary or general interest in any matters on the agenda? No? Okay. 132, Chairman's Communications. Today's meeting will be webcast live and will be capable of repeated viewing. Excuse me. Here he is. Welcome. I've already declared your substitution, Councillor, so... So I have no Chair's communications today, but I'm going to just propose how this we're going to organise the business. So to ensure that we and everyone else here understands the pertinent information in the case of the developers, I'm going to invite representatives from Marks Barfield and the West Pier Trust to address the meeting by way of a presentation. And then, so that will have David Marks, an overall introduction, Eleanor Harris, David Camp, Andrew Screen, and then Glin Jones. And then that will be followed by the officers presenting the officer report. Catherine Vaughan and Paula Murray will jointly do that. So I'll ask that members ask questions of the presenters at the end of their presentation, which I'm told will be no more than 30 minutes. And then we can have questions, as per usual, after the officer part of the report as well. And we do have a part 2 as well, and we will have to go into that bit separately as appropriate. So that's how I propose to proceed. Item 133, public involvement. There are no petitions, deputations, public questions or motions, and there is no member involvement either of the same type. So item 135, Brighton i360. It says, Catherine, you wanted to say something to start the presentation? Just move straight over. Right. David, would you like to kick off, please? Just press the button, David, and we can hear you. There we go.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. As set out in the report before you, we are making a meaningful investment in Brighton and Hove. So is Costa Capital Local Enterprise Partnership. We believe this is an intelligent investment. It's a smart thing to do. And when I say smart, I mean it's sustainable, it's measured, it's attainable, it's realistic and timely. It's an investment in progress, jobs and growth. And I realize quite a lot of time has elapsed since I met many of you. There was a little interruption of a global financial crisis. And you all know how passionate I am about this project. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to say much more at this point. Instead, I'd like you to hear from the team. Our presentation will take 30 minutes, no more than 30 minutes, and then we'll be happy to take questions. Eleanor is going to talk about the tourism benefits, employment, and the wider benefits to the city. David Camp will deal with visitor numbers and comparable attractions. And Andrew Screen will explain the proposed funding structure and security. And finally, Glin Jones, Chairman of the West Pier Trust, will provide some concluding remarks. Eleanor.
Thank you, David. We see this project as very much about Brighton investing in Brighton. This is Brighton borrowing money instead of a bank, so that instead of all the profits flowing off to a bank, instead they're going to flow back into the city for good. What I'd like to do is take you through some of the benefits that we see the project will deliver for Brighton. First and foremost, this is all about tourism benefits for Brighton. Tourism is an absolutely vital part of the economy here. It delivers around £1 billion of revenue per year and employs just under 20,000 people. That's 14% of all jobs in the city. And tourism has been booming. When we first started this project, Brighton got around 8 million visitors a year. Now, 8 years on, the city's getting over 10 million visitors. So, from our point of view, a fantastic place to open a new visitor attraction. And we hope to add to all the wonderful offer that's here already. The i360 will make a positive economic impact. We had an independent study done which concluded it would bring additional tourist revenues into the city in the region of £14 to £25 million a year. It will bring up to an extra 300,000 visitors to the city. Most importantly, perhaps, it will bring in up to around 50,000 extra overnight stays, which are worth nearly 10 times as much as a day visitor to the city. It will result in a better distribution of tourism so that more people go west, particularly important, I think, when the city's packed. It will be a significant boost to the regeneration of Preston Street. And of course, although Brighton is very successful, it can't rest on its laurels. Brighton is competing with many other fantastic destinations and needs to carry on innovating. There are then further spin-off benefits to the wider economy. What I'd like to say is all of that comes in an economic impact study, but we're actually going to be incredibly proactive about making all of that happen for the city. We want to do joint marketing, joint ticketing with the other attractions and venues here. We want to work with all the other operators to go out and really push Brighton as a destination. Most people will come to the i360 and probably spend no more than an hour on our site. We think it's a wonderful introduction to seeing the rest of Brighton. From up high in the i360, you'll be able to see all the wonderful other attractions in Brighton. So it'll be a great introduction to the city and a way to really encourage people to do not just our attraction, but to do other things as well. The project is also all about jobs. The independent economic impact study concluded that the attraction would deliver around 440 new jobs to Brighton and Hove. On our site, we will deliver around 170 permanent jobs. The vast, vast majority of those we expect to be filled locally. Will be proactively recruiting locally. It includes 75 full-time jobs and also flexible part-time roles that might suit people who want a work-life balance. We have more than 30 management roles, a real diverse range of roles that you can do at the attraction, similar actually to the Royal Pavilion. Roles such as visitor services, engineering, marketing, IT, finance, functions, HR, sales and chefs. In fact, we will pay incredibly well. We want to attract and retain good people. We've worked out our average salary will be £28,000, and we've made a commitment to paying the living wage. To dispel some of the myths that have been spouted on Twitter, there will be no zero-hour contracts at the site, although we will have a pool of some casual staff. In particular, we need those to help us for our corporate events. Conferencing and events will be an important part of what we do. We want to attract those high-value conference visitors, and we can offer a fantastic reception space for them. We also will be offering apprenticeships and management training. We want to help get young people into work. During the construction phase, there will be around 17 jobs FTE doing construction jobs. Also, many of those management jobs that I already mentioned will involve people starting 12 months, 18 months before we open, so some of those roles will start to be delivered even next year or the year after. In terms of the wider community benefits, since we last stood here in 2012, we've gone a long way, I think, to try and address some of these points and make more and more of what we have to offer help and benefit as many people in the community of Brighton and Hove. One thing that's remained the same is the percentage of our ticket revenue will go in perpetuity back to Brighton and Hove to be used for community benefit. This is something that Mark Sparfield also did at the London Eye, something they've been very proud of. We know that Seafront improvements is a particular focus and with a high bill coming along. We'll be offering discounts for local residents on the attraction, with the exception of our very peak summer season, July and August, when we will be mobbed with tourists. Since 2012, we've introduced a new commitment, which is we will be offering free entry to Brighton Hove State School children, and the idea is that every child attending the school can at one point in their school career come for free. In addition to that, there will be discounted entry for all schools and free teacher places. A new commitment we've also made is to offer quite a sizable number of free tickets, which will be targeted at local charities and community groups working with disadvantaged members of the community, because we recognise that not everybody will be able to afford to go up. and a percentage of our revenues will be flown back to the West Pier Trust for them to do their own heritage works. We hope that our project will help regenerate the seafront. The seafront is Brighton's shop window and therefore vitally important. I'd like to hand over to David Camp now. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to talk about visitor numbers. The projections of attendance are based on a combination of qualitative and quantitative aspects. It's not an exact science, but there are methods, there are procedures, there are ways of looking at visitor numbers and projecting them. I've been involved in projects for over 25 years in doing that. The process involves an examination of the markets, the local competition, the local environment, lessons from international and national attractions, and importantly, the uniqueness of the offer itself. And that's a very important aspect. We have a very high-profile, prominent, high-footfall location on the seafront. The site and the city have great transport links, we have parking in the area. Observation towers are popular around the world. Importantly, we have a significant resident market. There's about 70% of the population of England lives within 2 hours of the site. It's a very strong market, particularly for day trips. We also have a very high local tourist market, domestic and international, staying in locations within 1 hour. And importantly, it is a unique high-quality design with a ride element. It's very much a different type of attraction to a static observation tower that you might see elsewhere. If we look at the markets, we define the markets as people living within 1 hour and within 2 hours drive time of the site. We have 7 million tourists staying in locations within 1 hour of the site. Really strong number, both domestic and international. We have over 16 million residents living within 2 hours of the site, which is 30% of the population of England. We haven't even looked at the tourists to London. There are 25 million tourists to London. We haven't counted those in our projections. That presents an opportunity for further visitation should tourists from London decide to come down. We've excluded those for the moment because they're outside our market area. We look at penetration rates or percentage capture rates of those markets within various segments. We've summarised it here. And to give you an idea, we have 16 million residents, 7 million tourists, and to get our first-year attendance target of 820,000, we're looking at 3.6% of those people coming. Clearly, there are different penetration rates in different segments, and over time, that stabilises and settles down to an average of about 3%, to give us just over 700,000 as our ongoing stabilised attendance level. To give you an idea of a comparison, the London Eye gets 8% of all the residents and tourists within London within 2 hours of London. Brighton's looking at 3.5%. The Spinnaker Tower averages 2.8, Blackpool Tower 3, and the Shard, in the observation tower in London, which is capacity constrained, gets 1.7%. It'll complement and add to the current attractions in Brighton. We've got a range of attractions in Brighton. The i360 will complement those and enhance the range of attractions. The pricing will be commensurate with other attractions. The attendance levels we're looking at being stronger than some of the other attractions. Over time, we expect the dynamic to move from strong resident interest at the start to becoming far more stronger tourist attraction over time. So we're looking at the early years being approximately equal, residents and tourist visitation, and then over time the tourists will become the dominant visitation, just as they have at London Eye and at other attractions. And that's a very important thing, obviously, for Brighton and growing the tourism numbers. Seasonality is an issue. We understand that. We understand the dynamics of seasonality. We're looking at a strong summer peak, but actually a peak throughout the summer period. We're going to be quieter during the winter. We have a closure during January for maintenance, just as we do in London on the London Eye. And overall, we're looking at about half the visitation over the year being at weekends, which we know is popular, and therefore the dynamics are geared around that. Attractions are recession-proof. What we've seen over the last few years, ALVA, by the way, is the Association of Leading Visitor Attractions. It's the top 50 or so attractions in the country. They have seen attendance numbers grow by 4% since the start of the recession on an annualised basis, and last year they just reported in the press 2 days ago that 2013 saw a 6% increase in attendance to their attractions. So attractions continue to grow despite the recession, and post-recession, as we come out, we're going to see continued growth. And now on to the financials.
Good afternoon. I'm Andrew Screen, Head of GVA Financial Consulting. I'm going to take you through a sort of summary of the financials. Probably not as exciting as the other bits. But what we've got is a total project cost of about £46.2 million, and this is effectively funded through three tranches. The first tranche is the senior loan from the Council of £36.2 million. There's the equity investors, which is primarily David Marks and his family of £6 million. And then there's the local enterprise loan of £4 million, providing all the funding for the project. If you have a look at the Council's loan, it's a senior loan structure, which is one of the most robust structures and secure structures. And essentially, the Council borrows £33.4 million from central government, which is drawn down during construction. So effectively, there is a surveyor that signs this off to make sure that all the actual costs have been incurred before the funding is drawn down from the Council. Which means at the end of the project, end of the construction period, the Council would have basically put a loan forward of £36.2 million, including capitalised interest, to the i360 company. The important thing is that the Council's funding is drawn down after the equity investors and the LEP funding, so the Council's money only comes in right at the end, which reduces the risk. The loan is a 27-year loan, 2 years for the construction period and 25 years for the operations. The loan is paid off over the 25-year period and it's amortised. In other words, the interest and capital are repaid off. The way the interest is structured and the way the loan is structured is basically the Council borrows at a rate of 4.05% from central government. It then adds a margin on top of that, a profit margin of 3.75%, and then it makes a loan to the i360 of approximately 7.8%. And this also makes the loan state aid compliant as well. There's an intercreditor agreement between the Council and the local enterprise partnership, and essentially what that means is if anything happens, the Council gets first take at the actual assets. In other words, the Council gets repaid first, then the LEP, then the equity investors. The Council also has security over all of the assets as well. So in terms of what the Council actually receives in terms of payments, during the construction period, the Council will receive an arrangement fee, and this is for basically arranging the funding of £550,000, and that will be paid at financial close, which is approximately 2 months from now. The Council will also get a commitment fee, which is a fee during the construction of the project, and that's another £550,000. Every single year, the Council will receive an administration fee from the i360, and this is to pay for its administration of the loan. The Council also receives a margin. Remember the 3.75% I talked about that the Council adds to their rate? That's £985,000 a year for the 25-year period. So the Council will receive approximately £25 million over the 25-year period. This is the first year of operation cash flow. So we've got the gross income right at the top, and that's $10.78 million, and this is from ticket sales, it's from food and beverages, and from souvenirs. We've also got the overheads, which we deduct, and that's $4.83 million, and that's a cost of actual operation, giving us a net income before we actually service any debt of $6.39 million. The loan payment that the i360 makes to the Council is $3.29 million, and you can see that that's roughly half of the total net income that we've got to service debt, which means there's basically a surplus of $3.1 million, which can either be used to repay the loan a bit faster, and it can also be used to set aside money for the LEP repayment. You'll see the Council's loan that they pay through to government, £2.3 million, and therefore the margin between the £3.29 million and the £2.3 million is the £985,000 profit or margin. If we look at this on the loan actually over a 27-year period, this graph at the top there, if you look at the black line, the black line is the net income available to service debt. So that's after we've taken off the costs, that's the available income. And you'll see that line going up over the 27-year period. And this is because of inflation on the ticket sales and the income. You'll see the blue piece at the bottom. That is the amount of money that the council pays to central government every year on the loan. The green piece is the £985,000 margin. So in other words, the blue piece and the green piece is the total amount that is paid from the i360 company to the council. The important thing about this graph is you'll see the difference between where the black line is and where you see the coloured bars at the bottom. That's the amount of effectively headroom or the ability for the loan to be repaid. The yellow piece, by the way, is the payment to the local enterprise partnership. It's actually money that's set aside. The important thing about this graph is that if you had a look at it and said, well, at what level would the actual i360 have a problem paying back the council? Assuming our base case of 739,000, that's what the black line is. Basically, the i360 would have a problem paying back its loan at 444,000 visitors. In other words, 40% below what we think the actual achieved numbers will be. The other important number is the ability for the council to actually repay its loan back to government, and that will be at 347,000 visitors. So you can see that we can actually have a drop of about 53% of the visitor numbers, or right down to sort of 347,000 before it will impinge on the council's ability to repay. So this is very kind of secure in terms of lending. It has a lot of headroom or cover in the what we'll term in the financial industry. So just in terms of actually security of the investment and a bit of a summary of that, the council's loan is drawn down after the developer funding and after the LEF funding has been spent. The council's funding is drawn down against certificates that are approved by the council, so the council is only actually paying against costs that have actually been incurred. The council has step-in rights during construction and the operations. In other words, if anything goes wrong, the council can take over the company and the actual assets. It has a fixed charge, which is one of the highest securities that the council can have against the assets, and this will include the restaurant, shops, Sky Bar, hospitality, and the kiosks, as well as the attraction itself. The council has also put in place a debt service reserve account. This is a bit like a savings account. Any surplus monies that come out after they've paid back the debt go into this reserve account, and that's topped up until such time there's enough money in the reserve account to pay 50% of the next year's debt repayment. And that 50% will approximate to about 75% of the council's obligation. So you can actually have a drop in visitor numbers and still make that payment the following year. There's also what we call a cash sweep. What that does is before any money goes back to the equity investors or to David, what happens is we take half of that money and it's used to accelerate the loan or repay the loan faster, taking it from 25 years down to about 15 years. I'll now hand over to Glin.
It's rather a strange experience for me. I'm usually doing the scrutiny from the other side. Thank you. Thank you. I'm Glin Jones. I'm chairman of the West Pier Trust, and I'd first of all like to say that we're really grateful for the time and the detailed consideration that members and officers and many others have given to the i360 proposals. It's very much appreciated. Despite some detractors, which is not unusual for this city, the i360 has the overwhelming support of the business communities in the city, and I can assure you that they have crawled over the business plan time and time again. Despite letters to the editor, there is still overwhelming public support, and this is evidenced by the continuous support from hundreds of members of the West Pier Trust and letters of support from ordinary members of the public who want to see the city taking the lead once again. The Regent Society also supports the proposals, as does the Hove Society. This council has had the wisdom to continue to invest in tourism despite huge financial pressures. The i360 will be a catalyst for further growth and will help ensure that that investment in tourism is repaid handsomely. Tourism visitor numbers, you will have heard, to the city are increasing year on year, but there is fierce competition, and we have to be ahead of the game. Brighton and Hove has held a long-held reputation as an exciting, eclectic, and sometimes dodgy, different place to visit, which has constantly reinvented itself to reflect the changing demands of our visitors. That is why so many visitors return here year after year. The Seafront is the city's shop window, and successive councils have recognised that. The i360 will be a real jewel in the Seafront string of pearls, which will set it apart yet again from our competitors. Importantly, the income from the council from the i360 could go some way to help fund urgent repairs elsewhere on the seafront. It will also help the West Pier Trust fund its continuing programme of heritage educational work with schools, which we regard as very important. I'm on record as having said that the city needs to demonstrate it is open for business and that it is prepared to embrace the highest standards of design as part of the process of continual renewal. Saying yes to the i360, I believe, will say that loud and very clear. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, and admirably on time as well. So, do we have any questions for the presenters before we move to the officer reports? Geoffrey? Oh, right, yes, there are microphones there. Yeah. Hang on, oh, we need to, hang on. There we go, try.
Sorry. One question that has been raised, once or twice, and I have sent on to officers, and they have throughout this responded each time we've asked a question, but just to be absolutely clear, and that is, when this is built, the question of what happens at the West Pier, anyone doing anything at the West Pier, people behind the i360 won't have some sort of control over it. I probably expressed this badly, but this is a point that's been made by a number of people, and I do thank officers for continually answering all our questions, which we've been raising now over the last few weeks. But if someone could just say...
So, to paraphrase, what involvement would the i360 company have in any future developments the West Pier Trust choose to do in that area?
Yeah.
Okay. Glin?
If I can answer that. Yes, this is something obviously the West Pier Trust considered very carefully. Of course, any planning application for anything on a sea-based basis would be required to consult with an existing person in situ, which is a normal planning practice. And so, obviously, the needs of the i360 would need to be taken into account. But the i360 can't veto things just out of hand. It will have to go through the normal planning process. So the answer is yes, we are secure.
Can we try again?
Thank you very much for that very clear answer. Thank you.
Any other questions, Ian?
Thank you. Could you say something about the build? Yeah, something about the construction, about the timescales for the construction, and how confident are you about the costs of that construction? How do we know the bill won't increase as it goes through?
Okay. Go on, try it. You have to wait till the other person switches off. Then go. There you go.
Thank you. The construction contract is a fixed price contract. It has built within it contingencies. It's a well thought through, well thought out plan, far more well thought out than either the London Eye or the Spinnaker. And just for the record, despite the kindness of the Argus, we had nothing to do with the Spinnaker. So it's a very, very different procurement process from the Spinnaker, one that protects the council. There's no design risk on the council. There's no construction risk on the council. That all sits with the construction and design team. In terms of timing, it's a 2-year construction build. and we would look forward to the tower arriving by sea and landing on the beach at the West Pier site in a year's time, and the tower being open in summer of 2016.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Geoffrey Bowden?
When I visited the London Eye, I seemed to see as many people coming to look at it to go on it. And I wonder whether some of your projections include additional visitor numbers just to come and marvel at the thing, and then perhaps shop in some of the refurbished arches that we're beginning to see.
When I worked at the London Eye, I was there in 2002 and we applied for an extended planning permission, and we did quite a lot of work looking at what we described as the lookers who never turned into bookers, people who come and kind of marvel at the shape and design of the London Eye but never actually went on it. And we found that for every person that paid for a ticket to go on the London Eye, there were more than the same number again who came just to look at it. In fact, there were twice as many people who came to look at it as paid to go up it. So yes, that's absolutely right. What that does mean, if the same thing happens here, which we think it will, because it's also got this kind of wow design, we would expect as many as maybe 5 million people to walk along that stretch of the beach. Now that's obviously an amazing opportunity for all the arches, and it could do, something fantastic. The other thing I should probably add in all of that is, even when the tower is being built, it's going to be quite a marvel to come and see it, because you're going to have the cans, these steel cans, arriving on the beach by boat, which I myself want to be there for that day, and then the tower erection is going to take about a year. What we also know from the London Eye is there's just a huge interest in coming to see bold projects like this. So that should hopefully even be generating tourism for Brighton even before we've opened.
Thank you. A follow-up, Geoffrey?
I mean, the other aspect about this, that, as I understand it, it's not just going up and down and having a look around the countryside. Is this not also going to be another venue, another corporate entertaining or other venue where more income generation will be produced?
Yeah, thank you. That's absolutely right. So there's sort of several elements to the visitor experience. Of course, there's the going up and enjoying the view. In the evening, it's going to turn into what we're calling the Sky Bar, which will be a sophisticated venue, which will also host live entertainment, and we will fit into the programme of kind of other festivals going on in Brighton. So, for example, when the Food and Drink Festival is on, we would see ourselves running events on there as well in conjunction with that. It will also be a significant conferencing and functions venue. The pod itself can hold at least 200 people for a drinks reception. 200 people can stand around the edge. It can probably actually fit a lot more if we wanted to, so we'll try that out when we're open. The space at the bottom can fit upwards about 600 people for a corporate event. So when we've got big conferences in town, we can do some really big, bold events there. We want to work really closely with all the hotels and venues in the city that are bringing in the conference trade. We also have our 2 hospitality rooms on site, which can do meetings, etc. We hope to get our wedding and civil partnership licence so we can hold weddings on there. We also have a very large beachside restaurant, which is a fantastic spot. The caterers who we're working with are really excited about the opportunity. Great space. I'm giving a real plug here, but a great space to have, sundowners and have a nice meal. And we'll also have a shop. So there's lots of different kind of strings to our bow, which hopefully means there's some, surety about how we can help deliver some of the targets that we've set.
Okay. Any other questions? Gary?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Could I just ask, what is the life expectancy of the i360?
It has a standard design life, engineering design life of 50 years. What that means is at 50 years, it needs some maintenance. But like the London Eye, we would expect it to be there for over 100 years. The Eiffel Tower, indeed, has been there for over 120 years and is using inferior technology. Of course, there is maintenance that's required. There's annual maintenance, day-to-day cleaning. The cables will need to be checked every 4 years or every 15 years. All of that is built into the plan and is catered for by building up a maintenance reserve account so that there's never any risk of a shortfall of money when maintenance is actually required. 50 years is a sort of standard UK standard, in fact, for most buildings. Most buildings are designed for a 50-year life. In our case, because it's a steel structure, there would be some maintenance at that point, but not necessarily significant.
Thank you.
I'm grateful for that, Chairman. Could I just ask, bearing in mind the geographical location, how, in your experience, how does the maintenance problems of the Blackpool Tower compare with the Dollyfell?
I'm not that familiar with the maintenance of the Blackpool Tower, but we're obviously in a marine environment here on the beach, and the specifications for corrosion protection are of the highest order and suitable for the environment in which it sits. The design is also obviously taken into account wind regime, so there's no risk to the structure as a result of the very high winds, for example, that we've been experiencing recently because of the high factors of safety that have been applied by the engineers to the design, both in terms of the engineering of the structure and in terms of the material.
Thank you very much. No further questions? We'll move to the officer report. Catherine and Paula.
Thank you. This report is the culmination of joint working over many years between the Council, Coast Capital Local Enterprise Partnership and Marks Barfield Architects Limited and their advisors. And I have alongside me all those in the Council team who've played a very significant role in developing this project and bringing this report before you today. I know they will be happy to answer questions following this introduction. I think it's right to mention, and I know Councillor Theobald already has said this, that members have had many opportunities before today to have briefings from council officers and Marks Barfield in the weeks leading up to this decision. I know that they've been able to ask questions, challenge and satisfy themselves that they've got the information that they need to make this decision today. I think it's right to recognise that this is a very bold project and it is a significant funding decision for the Council. The report does set out the exciting opportunities for the Council and the City, and it also does talk about the risks of not progressing. The report explains the various funding options that have been explored, their risks and benefits, and why we've reached the recommendation to provide loan financing from the Public Works Loans Board. I think the report has been as open as it can be about the risks of the project. I think we have taken seriously the need to have as much information in the public domain as possible to show what careful consideration has been given to the risks and the steps taken to mitigate them and all the due diligence activity that has been undertaken to date. I think it is important to recognise that actually there is further due diligence work that would go on if the decision today was to proceed between now and financial close.
Paula? Sorry, Paula, hang on. Councillor Lepper.
I ask that you ask people not to use flash photography. There is an underlying health risk.
Okay.
It's not you can give a warning beforehand, as
Right.
I do on the BBC News when there's flash photography.
Okay.
You may have noticed it.
Right, thank you. Could those taking photos please not use flashes without giving a warning first? You're free to take photos, though, and film. Paula.
Thank you. The report also does outline the wider benefits of the i360 in some detail, as have the presentations. And I just wanted to pick out three of those in particular from a city perspective. Firstly, the regeneration impact. And that's on the immediate area, the land to either side of the i360 site, and particularly the implications for Preston Street, which has been an area that's suffered for some time, and the surrounding area. We have seen the knock-on benefit of improvements on our seafront before in the history of the city, and indeed elsewhere in the city. Secondly, the ability to create a revenue stream for the seafront itself. The report on page 10 goes into some detail about the issues on our seafront. We have an ageing and a failing infrastructure, and that in itself constitutes one of the highest risks for the Council on our risk register. We have a scrutiny panel launching to look at that. Again, that's just in the light of how important that issue is for us. The seafront is crucial to the city, for our residents, for businesses and inward investment and visitors. Finally, the tourism, the visitor offer, which has been talked about by the presenters as well. The i360 does bring something that is completely different to what we have already. The i360 was designed for that site. It is unique to that site, and that's the special thing about it. And in that, it draws on the history, both the history of the West Pier, and tells that story, and couples that with a viewing tower, which is very much for today. And bringing those two elements together, the very contemporary and the heritage of the city, is something that happens very successfully all over Brighton and Hove. It's complementary to the other things that our visitors come for, and we do need to renew and enhance what we have. We cannot sit on our laurels. A critical mass attracts people as much as anything, and that attracts people to stay as well as come as day trippers. The final thing that I would say about the tourism, the visitor offer, is that I know that the operators would bring very valuable experience with them from the other attractions that they have experience of outside of the city. I know that they would work very proactively with our other attractions, with our venues, our festivals and our events, to make a success not just for the i360 but for the wider city as well.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the officers who've worked on this. Not all of them are even here, but thank you everyone present and not. And I understand the Local Enterprise Partnership confirmed last week their approval for the loan, just as a point of information. I propose now that we have questions for officers. Once we're done with questions, we'll have a general debate. Then we'll move to part two, for the part two bit, and then we'll come back for the vote. So, questions. Bill?
Just a point of clarification, really. Glin mentioned the planning process. As I understand it, this has already gone through the planning process.
Yes, he was referring to future projects that might be also in West Pier land. Is that any? Yeah, fine. Warren.
Thank you, Chair. I voted for this project in 2006, but in 3.1, the report begins in July 2012. I'm wondering why there isn't a full history of the project in the report papers today.
Well, from my perspective, the planning, this is a consent on a financial deal, and that started back at the date referred to, and I think probably, I'm sure officers can speak out, they were trying to seek clarity of the difference between the planning consent, which is a time before, and the financials, but I don't know if Cathy wants to be
Yes, I think that's a fair description. Obviously, I'll make reference to the fact that officers have been working on this project for a number of years. The key decision about the council potentially being an investor in the project is where we have begun the history of this particular report. We're also mindful that it is a long and complicated report, and trying to make sure that we put the right level of information in here without too much. So that's the reason, but there is no reason why we can't provide or couldn't have provided if people want additional information on the time before that.
Okay. Warren?
I raise it because obviously the planning permission that's in place, and I know funding is not a material planning consideration, but when planning permission was granted, this was an entirely self-funding project.
Okay. Any other questions? Ian?
Thank you. I came here 35 years ago. I think that was about 5 years after the West Pier closed. So I've just watched it slowly deteriorate since that time. And I've seen lots of things come and go, lots of ideas come and go. But we do have an ageing and failing infrastructure. So what else? What's plan B if this doesn't happen? Is there an alternative? Yeah.
Okay.
I think your question is particularly about seafront infrastructure investment. I think, as Paula has already said, we have identified that on the Strategic Risk Register as a major financial challenge for us as an organisation. And there are no simple answers to how we would fund that, but there is, of course, a scrutiny panel that is trying to think through some of the options associated with it. I think it is likely that quite a significant amount of our future local transport plan funding will need to go towards some of the highways infrastructure in relation to the seafront, but I know that creates conflicts for members who have potential other priorities for how they would like to spend that money. But then that is only the highways element of the seafront infrastructure, and of course we have in the past, I think obviously the previous administration made a decision to invest in the bandstand as an example. We had to use council capital receipts to be able to fund that. There was no other obvious funding source for it. So I think it will be a challenge to the authority to find potential projects that generate sufficient income to be able to fund themselves and potentially be able to add further value to the seafront, because it will be really challenging for us to find capital investment from within the council's direct resources.
I would take that 70 years with the LTP funding, wouldn't it? Glin, do you want to comment from the West Pier Trust point of view about Plan B, or if you do switch on, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. The point is that West Pier Trust has no money at all. I mean, we've been limping along for years. And clearly, if the scheme goes ahead, we would fund a whole range of things. The current structure out there is in managed decline. It's falling into the sea. We do not have the money to clear the wreckage there. Certainly, if this didn't go ahead, we wouldn't be able to do so. And we would have to hand back to the council a problem of a large hole in its seafront. We haven't the money to repair the arches there. We don't have any resources whatsoever. So it presents, I dare say, by default, the council with a huge problem.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll move to general debate. I see no other questions, so do I have any speakers? Geoffrey, then Bill. Geoffrey Theobald.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman. The Conservative group have properly looked into this issue in more depth, in more detail, have asked more questions than any other issue that I can actually think of over the last few years. And I want to thank officers and indeed everybody else involved for coming back with the questions that we've raised. So if any members of the public are wondering why we haven't asked many questions, quite frankly, it's because we've asked so many and we've pored over the details of this because it is an incredibly important decision. I mean, I know that I'm assuming that the Green Group has done exactly the same as we have done. I think it's a pity that I understand that the Labour Group refused the offer for similar briefings. And as I say, most of this presentation we have seen before. Going back over the last 25 years or so, and I think that's already been said, there have been a whole lot of projects that have never happened for one reason or another. And I can list a whole number of projects, some of which we all very much regret for one reason or another, others maybe not so. But Brighton and Hove has gained, whether we like it or not, a very poor reputation amongst developers. There's no question about that. Developers think that Brighton and Hove City Council is a very difficult council to get permission for anything. And consequently, a development such as this will send out a signal. I have no doubt that the city is open for business. And if you actually look at this part of the seafront, there can be no doubt that it is run down. There's very little to attract people moving westwards from West Street, apart from the morbid fascination with looking at the collapsing West Pier. Now, if we vote today with Councillor Morgan, Councillor No, then we will be condemning the seafront here to many more years of stagnation. And I wouldn't want to be walking along here in 2-3 years' time and seeing the seafront looking exactly as it does, and probably a little bit worse. One of the attractions of this scheme, apart from the fact that the developers have put probably 6 years of their life into this, this is a scheme that is ready to go. It has planning permission and an enormous number of other permissions, all that is needed, and we've looked at all these various permissions. As I've already said, the i360 team have spent an awful lot of their own time and money gaining those permissions, and it would be completed, as has already been said, 2 years from now. So are we really going to turn all this down when there is no alternative? There is no plan B. In my view, to do this would be the height of irresponsibility. Do we really want Brighton and Hove, a genuine city by the sea, to slip back as some other, and I'm not going to name them, formerly successful seaside resorts have done? Brighton and Hove is one of, if not the largest seaside resort in terms of international visitors. It is probably the prime seaside conference resort. And there was a very interesting programme, I don't know if members saw this, on Tuesday night with you and Davey. It was on quite late, on the BBC, talking about how the London economy is rapidly outstripping and pulling away from the rest of the country. The second part of this programme, I think it's on Monday night, is about what other cities are doing to catch up. Now, I'm quite convinced, had they made this programme in 2 months' time, Brighton would feature here. The word critical mass was actually mentioned earlier by an officer, and if you actually watch that programme, you'll see that successful cities need to have that critical mass. You need to have people in all sorts of places, whether they are academically, whether they are scientifically, whatever means, working close together. And I believe that Brighton has all these sorts of advantages, and this will just be another one. The city's minister is actively encouraging cities to invest in their own economic growth. I've listened to him, I know. Places like Bristol, Sheffield and Leeds are all doing this. This is what the Public Works Loan Board is for. This is why the government has set up city deals and local enterprise partnership. If we don't emulate these other cities, and there's a whole list I can give who are doing the same sort of thing, then Brighton and Hove will get left behind. The benefits of building the i360, I believe, are huge, and are clearly laid out in the report. And I don't want to be critical of my friends on the left, but I do find it staggering that the Labour group are going to vote against all the benefits. We've heard about the 440 new jobs, the apprenticeships, up to 305,000 new visitors to the city, up to 49,000 additional overnight stays in the city, up to £25 million in increased tourist revenue. I believe that it will attract more conferences to the city and help our Brighton Centre. And in short, it will be a massive boost to the local economy and a wholesale regeneration of this part of the seafront. And that is not to mention all the financial benefits to the council from entering this arrangement. Now, I've studied the business plan very carefully, as have many of my colleagues, and I want to pay tribute to a lot of my colleagues in the Conservative group who've had individual meetings with officers, and officers know, sitting over there, the sort of questions they've asked. I'm as certain as one can be that the i360 will be profitable and that council taxpayers will therefore benefit. Last week, at the Budget Council, Councillor Morgan did actually talk about Labour group giants of old. I knew some of those, and he referred to Lewis Cohen. I didn't know Sir Herbert Carden. I did know Lewis Cohen. I didn't know Sir Herbert Carden. I did know Dennis Hobden very well. I'm quite convinced if they were here today, I'm certain of the way they would vote today. So we will be supporting this. as I've already indicated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bill Randall.
Thank you, Chair. Well, there is, of course, a great tradition of local authorities investing in their communities, which goes back to the 19th century. And I support this scheme for the same reasons that I gave when we first won the LEP support for this 2 years ago. And I'm going to repeat them. They've been said, but I think they're very important. I think it is very important that the city has new attractions, that it does refresh its offer. We are in competition with other people, and we do need to have something new and something different, which it's managed to do over the years, and we need to do it again. It will be a growth engine for a neighbourhood in the city that seriously needs a facelift, and which has been neglected, I fear, for several years. It will raise money for the city at a time when we're strapped for cash through the interest and also through the other payments. There's a job creation aspect as well, and the training and the apprenticeships. And I'm very glad to see that the company is embracing the living wage, which is something that we've worked hard on very much over the past 2 years, and now account for about 20% of all people earning the living wage in Britain. And I'm very impressed with what they said at the presentations about the community offer and the way that the community will be involved and will get special discounts for most of the year. I think that's deeply important because, as we know, there are a lot of people in this city who do not earn a lot of money. In fact, about 20% of the people in the city live on the minimum wage income, which is not very much at all. And, of course, it has business support. The business community is behind this. In fact, almost every statement of interest I've seen has been for it. The other people we've been talking to about this, who are very, very supportive of this, are the trade unions, who see the prospect for jobs and training, and for the spin-off in that whole area of the city. And finally, I'd just like to say, I think it sits well with Brighton, and will help us maintain our raffish image. It is new, it is different, and Geoffrey was saying earlier that we need to be Brighton and not some of the other cities, and we need to work at that all the time. It is a very special place. I think this is very exciting, and I think it will enhance that special nature which is the reason we all live here, and people come to see us.
Thank you very much. Councillor Warren Morgan.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not going to be party political today like one of the previous speakers. This is far too important a decision for that. I absolutely respect differing views taken across all parties on this issue. As I said earlier, in 2006 I voted for this project when it came to planning. I supported the project. I think on a personal level at that point I thought, here's something that will be built, that someday, long after I've left the council, ceased being a councillor, I could say I had some small part in that. So I was happy to vote for it at that point. But just a quote from the report to P&R in July 2012. The council loan will now be capped at 17.8 million and the LEP contribution will remain at 3 million. The remainder of the funding will, as previously agreed, be contributed by the equity providers who will fund 20 million of the project cost and, as previously, carry the greater risk burden. The council will be committed to repaying the loan together with all interest accruing thereon. And today we're being asked to provide 36 million via the Public Works Loan Board, more than double that amount and 3 times that of the other investors combined. My group made it clear in 2012 that while we supported the project, we would be unlikely to consider any further increase in council-supported borrowing to fund it. We believe then and we believe now that the private sector must take its share of the risk, carry its part of the burden in delivering this project, one that we were assured in 2006, when I voted for it at planning, would involve little or no council finance at all. It has been said, again a few moments ago, that I and my group have opposed this project without listening to the briefings or reading the information, as if this was a new project being put forward to us for the first time. As I said a moment ago, I was on the planning committee in 2006. I've been briefed along with my group when it came back in 2012. I've been to the briefings with the developers that you and others attended a few weeks ago. I've had briefings just last week from senior officers, and along with colleagues from my group, I met with David Marks and Glin Jones this week, and I'm grateful to them for their time to ensure that we did have all of the up-to-date information on which to base our decision. Yes, this is a project that could and should deliver £980,000 to the council each year, and we don't disregard that figure lightly. Few, if any, of the design and operational details have changed in 8 years since this was first proposed. We are simply being asked for a bigger and longer loan to support a project that no private investor would back, despite 8 years of efforts to do so. It won't be councillors taking the decision here today who deal with the outcome. It will be our successors in the years to come who either reap the benefits or deal with the consequences. I do want to support this project, but I cannot, in good conscience, even with all of the evidence in the papers before us today, vote to commit this council and the residents of this city to underwrite such a large loan over such a long period. I will vote against with regret, because this is a project I have long supported. I support the project, but I cannot support the financing of it as presented here today. I sincerely hope that the optimistic projections for visitors and income are right, and that I am wrong to be pessimistic. I sincerely hope that if it goes ahead, this project does succeed. I will do all I can with colleagues to ensure it is a success if it is given approval today. If it does not succeed, then this council and the residents of this city will be left with an asset that has no alternative use and a debt they cannot repay for years to come.
Thank you. Councillor Geoffrey Bowden.
Before I say anything, I'd just like to take issue with Councillor Theobald for potentially damaging the reputation of our city. This morning I spoke to developers and construction industry people who certainly did not have the idea that we were a difficult city to do business in. We talked about the King Alfred, Preston Barracks, Brighton Centre, Marina, Circus Street, on it went, and they were very excited about the prospects of doing business in this city, as I hope Mark's Barfield are as well. I totally and utterly respect the views of the Labour group. We are talking about very big numbers here. No project that I know of is without risk. And I think I am convinced by the independent assessments of this project that have been done at arm's length, and certainly by the LEP, who were also in the meeting this morning that I and Martin Randall addressed. They do not go into that good night lightly without assessing the risk, and they come with a very hard nose because they want their money back, as we do. And all the things that have been said about jobs, I was really pleased to see that the GMB support this project because of the jobs element of it. And I hope that the assessments are right. Like Bill, I'm very pleased to see that Marks Barfield have embraced the living wage. And we know from the arrangements with this city put into place under the last administration that there will be new jobs and apprenticeships and work done with local colleges to support new jobs. And once it's up, the opportunities for new revenue from the seafront arches come into play, which will bring in business rate tax. And of course, I asked the question about those people not going up but coming to look. Those people, I expect, will go along and make those seafront arches viable by spending their pounds in there. So, from that point of view, I'm excited. The Plan B argument has been exercised, and it came up when I was sitting down with officers today, because I'm going before Jill's scrutiny panel to look at the seafront. And frankly, I don't know what Plan B is if some of these things don't come off, because the infrastructure costs that we have, we've got various funds that we can put in for, we'll be in competition with other people. But there is a lot to be done on the seafront. The i360, I think, will play a critical part in enabling us to do it, and not just being dependent on Councillor Davey's transport fund. Oh, isn't it? All right. Well, I have to beg, borrow and steal from him to get money for that. But we have about £80 million worth of work that we need to be doing. and I don't know where it's going to come from. This will play an important contribution, and for that reason, I will certainly be voting for it this evening.
Thank you. Councillor Gary Pelzer Dunn.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, sometimes it's very easy to say no because you're not having to make a definite decision. And I have to say that in this chamber some 30 years ago, when Hove Borough Council was asked to contribute some money to the West Pier, I can hear what I said. And I said, oh, no, it's in Brighton. It's nothing to do with us. And I was wrong. Because it was to do with Hove. And I'm now speaking from, shall we say, as a Hoverian. And that is that this is an exciting prospect. And it will help to revitalise West Brighton. But of course, West Brighton also was the name in historic terms for Hove. And I think it will actually revitalise the eastern part of Hove as well. Because there's no doubt about it, if you go back over about 20 years, the Seafront is the shop window for the city. And it got into a pretty disgusting condition. Let's be perfectly honest. Who would want 15 years ago to have gone down onto Brighton Seafront? And it took the Labour administration to actually really bring together and do the fishermen's hard, sort of really starting. And then the last Conservative administration with the bandstand. But that's piecemeal. And I'm supporting Geoffrey Bowden when we've got to look forward to the whole of the seafront, from really the marina to the lagoon. And with the exception of one or two bright spots, the rest of it is pretty tatty. I wouldn't want to come down to Brighton and Hove to look at it. I've got to be perfectly honest. I'd much prefer to go somewhere else. We have to have the goods in the window to attract the people. And I think that this really will do the job. What I do say, and I've been as sceptical as I can be, and I've questioned the figures. And I'm reassured that even if the figures are too optimistic, the achievements will be still far better than the most pessimistic. And the Council's safety line, the safety net, is based upon really the pessimistic figures. And I think that's important because we have to look after our residents' monies, but we also have to look after our residents' future. And, looking around, looking at my esteemed colleague here, we actually haven't got much of a future, let's be perfectly honest. But my children hopefully have, your grandchildren, our grandchildren. Let them be proud of what maybe, their parents or grandparents said. It's always better, if it's going to be a mistake, to make it a positive one. And I say we should be positive, and I will be voting for this wonderful scheme.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Davey.
Thank you. Well, as I said, I came here 35 years ago, and I think one of my regrets has always been that the West Pier had been closed at that time, and I've never actually kind of been on it. And I have watched it steadily deteriorate over those last 35 years. I was quite shocked the other day in the storms to see the BBC report said the future of the pier was now in doubt. Well, it was clearly quite a bad storm. But, when I came down here, the seafront was poor. It really was. And as a young lad from Devon who spent my time on the beach and in the pubs by the river, I was horrified. There was actually nowhere to go and drink on the seafront. And it really was a very uninteresting place. But full credit to the Labour administrations in the 90s, I think it was, that put the effort in and created what we've got now. But actually, kind of what we really have now is an ageing and failing infrastructure, and it is literally falling apart. And I fear that if we don't take this step now, we will be back probably in a worse place than we were in the 70s and the early 80s. We've heard various estimates of the amount of work that needs doing, £17 million, £100 million, who knows? But we know it's an awful lot. I think we're just starting to scratch the surface, but that scratch is costing us about £5 million. And reality is, I think, we've got a choice now. Either we build on the momentum we've got, and the work that's taken place that will start to be finished this year, which will give us those new arches, is absolutely tremendous. And I think we have a real opportunity now, as people say, we're supposedly coming out of the recession. The visitor numbers are continuing to increase in the city, so it feels like that the momentum is with us. The city is resilient, there is bucking trends, but I feel that in order to continue that, we need to make some bold steps. Otherwise, we run the risk of going into reverse and possibly going into decline. And you've already got to look at Preston Street to see what that looks like, really. And I feel that that's a place that's desperately in need of some love and attention. I know, Jason,
be nice to Preston Street.
Sorry, yes. And we are trying very hard to be nice to Preston Street, but it does need some attention, and we need to give people reasons to go to this area of the city and to park in the Regency car park, which we all love so much. So I think we have a choice. And of course there's risk. Everything has risk. But I think the bigger risk is in not taking this. I think if we don't take this opportunity now, the risk of having a crumbling infrastructure running parallel with the final decline of the West Pier is far, far too great for us to take. And I actually think it is a very exciting time. I think that link with London is a great is something we're not making enough of, really. I did see some of that programme, and I will watch the one on Monday. It wasn't that late, Geoffrey. It was only 9 o'clock, I think. Oh, was it? Sorry.
Okay.
I think you got it the second time round. But I was up at Borough Market a couple of weeks ago on a Saturday, and it was heaving. It was absolutely heaving. London was heaving. I thought, all these people are an hour from Brighton. We need to get these people down here to really, really enjoy what we've got here, because I do think Brighton and Hove is a fantastic place. But we need to continue building on the success of our predecessors, and this is part of that, so I will very much be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Anne Norman.
Thank you, Chair. As you would expect, and as Councillor Theobald has already explained, my group has put a huge amount of thought into whether to support the i360 project, and I'd like to say here today that my group do not ever need reminding of our responsibility to the electorate who elected us to represent them, as well as to those residents who did not choose to elect us. I don't believe that anyone would disagree that this is in an area that needs considerable investment, and the sad decline of the state of the unforgettable West Pier is inevitably meant that Preston Street and its immediate area is no longer the vibrant environment that I remember as a child. As has been said already, Chair, there is no plan B. It is the proposal that is on the table. But that is not the reason that I'm supporting the recommendations today. I simply think that this will be good for Brighton and Hove and will bring additional visitors to the city by train, bus, and those who visit by car will help to produce additional income for the city by parking in the underused Regency Square car park, as Councillor Davey has already said today. Chair, I have looked in considerable detail at the financial projections, and whilst none of us can ever guarantee success, I think it will be in the best interest of the future of this city that I love and the residents who live in it, and we must agree the proposals. In addition, this does offer finance and a future to the West Pier Trust. Chair, my mother was a Brighton councillor at the time that the Brighton Centre and the Marina proposals were agreed. And in the early days, she used to ponder on whether she had made the right decision in supporting the schemes. Well, more than 40 years on, both do need regular updating, but both are still operating. The Brighton Centre is still attracting visitors from abroad to conferences, and visitors who attend a variety of concerts which run throughout each year. And just go and look at the number of yachts that are moored in the marina all year round to gauge its success. I would just like to thank the Marks Barfield team for their willingness to discuss every aspect of the proposal with us and on more than one occasion. And I must also mention Mark Ireland, who's made himself available at very short notice sometimes to answer any of the many financial queries that have come up during discussions. Chairman, this is a good proposal, and I am happy to support the recommendations before us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Les Hamilton.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just say I can remember quite distinctly that back in about 8 or 9 years ago, I was chairing the planning committee here, and we tried to finish it quickly because we were going down to al frescoes on the seafront to see the plans for this new i360 tower. And we finished and got down there, I remember, and I'm pretty sure I was still chairing that committee when these plans for the i360 were passed. And I was fully supportive of that. And as has been said by Councillor Morgan, I'm fully supportive of the scheme that we had 2 or 3 years ago. And in fact, I agree with a lot of what has been said here. So what I've got to do is to try and map in my own mind the risk against the benefits that will come around. And I think Councillor Pelzer Dunn has already mentioned the thing about the risks. Now, as I see it, we're looking here at the i360 operators paying £3.29 million a year for 25 years. I make that over £80 million to pay off the council and to give us the money we're going to get each year. That is a lot of money, and I think 56 million of that goes to the Public Works Loan Board, and 24 million roughly comes to the council. So that is a big risk to take on. And this £3.2 million a year, as I see it also, that is the equivalent of about 270,000 attendances net of VAT, and that's if they're adult attendances. If you bring in children and free people and so on, you're probably looking at over 300,000 attendances just to actually pay off that £3.29 million. So while I agree that there's some wonderful benefits from this scheme, I'm trying to look at this in the views of the residents of the city who will get some benefits, but I'm just concerned that if in 15 years, 20 years, well past my time, this scheme should not be successful, that then this council, I think, is going to be left with probably an amenity that perhaps nobody really wants because it's not proved successful after that period of time. And I with very much regret, I say that while I wish the scheme all the very best, because of what I think is the risk involved, I don't really think I can honestly support it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Well, a lot of things have been said. I think it's just important to note there were and are other private options, and they are listed on pages 3 and 4 of the report. I'd like to thank everyone who's put so much time and careful effort into considering it, all the members, all the partners. It has been possibly the most scrutinised report in my memory on the council, and this is after all the previous decisions and reports on it. As others have said, there is a critical time now for the seafront, and there's 70 to 100 million pounds worth of investment. For whatever reason, over the many, many years, centuries even, of that seafront being built up, no money was put aside each year for its renewal, and so now we have to find the full cost. And we all know we don't have much money as a council. This is at least something that goes towards that, and it's, in real terms, I think worth 21 million in present-day terms. And I can speak personally that Preston Street and the Regency Square area, the hotels there and the other traders are crying out, and I'd like to thank their representatives for being here today. They are desperate for something to happen, anything positive in that area, because it really is a struggle to keep going there as traders. And that is reflected in the number of hotels, businesses and associations who've come out in support, as well as the unions. And I agree with many others who said actually doing nothing is a bigger risk than doing something here. Failure to move forward with this would mean that we face unknown cost of picking up the piece of a West Pier trust with no other income source, unknown cost of making this all safe and good with no revenue stream in the near-term horizon, but also the opportunity to expand the mix of attractions for the city is hugely important. We know that the foreign tourists who come and spend a week in London are currently not being sold day trips to Brighton. And something like this would add to the offer. And we know, speaking this morning with the Dome and Festival and Pavilion and the Heritage Lottery Fund, joint ticketing is really where everyone sees the future of tourism going. Packages of hotels, i360, Sea Life Centre, Pavilion, museums, all of that is the way forward, and it will benefit all of our key attractions. And I just reflect on this, and I have satisfied myself that the figures are robust, they are moderate, they are not excessive, and that there is sufficient margin for us to be safe, even if there is underperformance. I just reflect and I think if any other city council had an approach from the people who made the London Eye, given all its success and international recognition, they would jump at it. And for us to do anything other than support this would be madness. So I hope that we can all support this and keep moving our city forward. And on that note, I think we're well debated. I'm now going to do the part 2 bit. Does the committee agree that we go to part 2? So we're now about to go into part 2 to discuss the report under item 137 of the agenda, which relates to the Brighton i360 proposals. The report contains exempt information as defined under paragraphs 3 and 5 of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972. That's a good one, the 72 one. The committee has already resolved to go into part 2. Therefore, I ask that members of the public leave the chamber. Following consideration of the Part 2 report, we will come back to the open session for a vote on the recommendations. So, can those who are not here for the purposes of the meeting, and I'm afraid it has to be the i360 team as well, could you leave the chamber? If we have questions for you, we'll call you back in. So we've had the debate, we've had the questions, so I'm simply going to move to the vote now. The recommendations of the report are on pages 1 and 2. We've got 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4 and 2.5. I recognise there's a differences of opinion, so I'll just ask for a hand vote. All those in favour of the recommendations, please show.
7.
All those against, please show.
That's 3, Chair.
Abstentions? Okay, that report is approved. 138, do we agree to keep the items that were listed as part 2 of the agenda and decisions thereon remain exempt from disclosure to press and public? Thank you very much. The meeting is closed.